At 3:42 on a clear autumn night, Flight 7X vanished from routine civil tracks. No distress call, no storm, no hostile action. For 30 years it sat in reports as an unread line on a map. Tonight we trace the missing path to follow the small decisions and quiet errors that, stacked together, became catastrophic. Flight 7X was a short domestic hop between two coastal cities. On board were 87 passengers, a captain with 2 decades of experience, and a co-pilot on the cusp of his first solo night crossing. The airline was modest but reliable. The aircraft was a common regional type, maintained on a standard schedule. Weather briefings reported scattered clouds and good visibility. On paper, nothing screamed danger, but paper hides details. A maintenance log from 3 weeks earlier notes a recurring compass variance. A dispatcher's scribble mentions a temporary routing tweak during busy evening hours. Minute items like these often pass as routine. Alone they are trivia. Together they begin to draw a different map. We reconstructed the final hours using radar archives, fragmented ATC transcripts, and interviews with controllers who remember the quiet shift. At first the aircraft reported passing the outer waypoint. Radar blips then show a subtle drift to the west. Controllers asked for confirmation. The crew acknowledged. Minutes later, an unusual radio fragment appears in a backup recording that never reached the official log. 7X. Confirm heading, cut. Instrument overlays from recovered telemetry show a divergence. Compass and GPS disagreeing by a few degrees, then more. The cockpit voice recorder, partially recovered, contains a murmured remark about a hum near the compass housing and an aside about unreliable nav. The standard response would be to declare a nav fault and switch to secondary instruments. Instead, the crew attempted a visual correction, relying on landmarks and routine procedures. The aircraft crossed into a restricted corridor. Ground radar shows a corrective turn. Then the returns tighten. Finally, the signal ends abruptly and without the alarms that would mark an in-flight fire or system failure. Nothing in the immediate data suggested an explosion, a mid-air breakup, or a deliberate act. Just a sudden silence that baffled investigators. When wreckage was located along a remote stretch of coastline, investigators cataloged physical damage and mechanical stress. Yet some items were deprioritized. A single compass bracket, corroded in an odd pattern, was logged as routine wear. An eyewitness on a coastal road reported a strangely low flight path and flickering cabin lights. That statement reached an investigator who was reassigned the next week. The note never found its way into the public report. We've seen that corrosion pattern before. It suggests moisture ingress where the design shouldn't allow it. On a regularly inspected plane, it's unusual. Someone should have asked why, says a retired mechanic. An unsigned dispatcher note mentioned a temporary procedural tweak on busy evenings. Maintenance sheets carried a shorthand line about intermittent nav anomalies. That never triggered a deeper review. The co-pilot had flown multiple sectors the day with only a short layover before the overnight leg. An approved swap that, on paper, looked acceptable. Fatigue research shows even small reductions in rest can erode decision-making. These are not dramatic causes by themselves. They are the tiny threads that, woven together, form a dangerous rope. We examined radar sweeps across years at the same airport and found a pattern. Occasional compass variances logged. Small instrument discrepancies, near misses chalked up to procedural noise. Each incident closed as an isolated occurrence. When regulators and airlines review safety, they often seek a single cause, the smoking gun that explains everything. But sometimes the hazard is cumulative, tolerance for small anomalies. Repeated without corrective escalation, systems are designed to be resilient. But resilience depends on detecting and acting on small deviations before they align. If regulators, operators, and crews normalize a little odd, then you create room for disaster. Notes an aviation safety researcher, back in the wreckage. Metallurgical tests showed corrosion at a compass mount inconsistent with the aircraft's maintenance history. Parts of the navigation housing bore micro-abrasions indicating intermittent contact with an electrical conduit that could induce compass error. The airline's internal memo referenced a supplier replacement 2 months prior. But the paperwork trail is thin. Who signed off? Who checked the retrofit? Those questions loop back to internal practices that favored speed over verification. During a period of heavy demand and busy schedules, sign-offs can become performative. The box is ticked, but the verification, the hands-on check, is rushed or skipped. The documents look complete. The work sometimes isn't, says a former inspector. The formal public inquiry emphasized a probable mechanical fault with human factors as contributors. Families received summaries, and the industry offered technical fixes. Yet independent researchers and surviving relatives kept probing. They found redacted maintenance entries, internal emails withheld under confidentiality claims, and a cluster of near incidents at the same airport that, if connected, suggest a systemic tolerance for small but recurrent failures. We located an unsigned note from a third-party ground crew, recalling a late-night calibration attempt that failed. The crew logged the event in a shift handover book, but it never appeared in central records. A controller recalled asking for additional cross-checks that night and being told, "They've got it handled." I asked them to confirm nav-source. They replied that they were using visual cues. In hindsight, the conversation should have triggered escalation, says a former controller years later. New archive releases and the testimony of a whistleblower allowed a re-examination. Previously unseen emails revealed that several minor issues had been raised internally and not escalated. The regulator adopted targeted reforms, mandatory cross-checks when primary and secondary nav sources disagree, stricter auditing of maintenance sign-offs, and improved crew fatigue monitoring tied to rostering software. These changes cannot rewind lives lost, but they do narrow the margin for repeated small failures. Families pursued litigation and public inquiries that forced the release of additional documents. The story shifted from a singular mechanical mystery to a cautionary tale about normalization of deviance, how organizations, over time, accept lower standards because nothing immediate breaks. Flight 7x's missing path is no longer just a line on an old map. It is a composite lesson, small anomalies ignored, scheduling decisions made under pressure, paperwork that reads complete but conceals shortcuts. Individually modest, these elements accumulated until they redirected a routine flight into tragedy. The sky appears empty until you learn to read the marks on the map. Those marks are where prevention begins. For those who lost someone on Flight 7X, answers came slowly. For the industry, a series of reforms followed only after public pressure and persistent scrutiny. The missing flight path remains a warning. Small decisions, repeated and unexamined, can redraw the course of many lives.